Welcome to Inner Peace with Dr. Reese, a program that can help you become liberated in the modern world. Now, here's your host, Dr. Kevin W. Reese.
So how do you activate your heart? Welcome to episode number 58. Today, I'm talking with Leyla Salvade. She's a spiritual teacher, a heart guide, if you will. Her amazing story includes going to a Zen Monastery with Thich Nhat Hanh, and later on, going through what she calls spiritual warfare, to the point where she had to sit down for 3 days and 3 nights and do nothing. In this recording, we're going to talk about these amazing stories, plus communicating through vibrations, loving your shadows, making the trip from your head to your heart, awakening your inner intelligence, merkaba, and much more. Before I continue, I want to remind you that my meditation album is available to you. It's on Spotify, Apple, and wherever you can stream or download. I recommend you try the cave meditation and eventually work your way up to the nobody meditation. I appreciate you contacting me on social media and letting me know how it's been a positive force in your life. But now, I can't wait for this conversation. Me and Leyla, we could talk for hours and hours. So Leyla, welcome to the Inner Peace podcast.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
How does someone activate their heart?
Oh, good question. It's a unique journey for everybody. I truly believe that there's one ultimate truth, and then there's many ways to arrive at that truth, right? So everybody has their own unique journeys and paths. So how an individual activates their own heart is unique to them, I believe. It could be a heartbreak. It could be an ego break, a dark night of the soul. It doesn't always have to be something that is painful, but usually I find it is, because it's a remembering of what we've actually forgotten. And that is painful to recognize and admit to ourselves, that we've actually forgotten how to use and how to connect to the most beautiful and powerful force within us.
You're speaking my language. You know, people aren't aware of what their potential is.
I know.
And so you're one of these light workers that helps people. What would you say is I'm going to use the word advantage of someone discovering the wisdom of their heart, just unlocking that tool, unlocking that energy?
The potential is infinite.
Mm-hmm.
It's endless. That the heart is infinite wisdom. It's literally connected to infinite amounts of time and space and information. So it's endless. It's infinite.
Yeah. It's interesting because I was going through your story a little bit, and our stories are very similar, and we crossed paths like 2014, maybe 2015, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
At the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. They're getting a plug right now. There's no way around it. I was a health coach there, or a business coach, I guess you can call it. And you were a student.
I was.
And I remember talking with you. That was my job, to talk to students. And you had this standing light thing that you were working on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my job was, we were talking health, we were talking diet, and so that's kind of how I started and everything too, is diet, food, how can you change your body through diet and lifestyle changes. But you were on a different, there was another layer for you. You were on another journey. You were on another path, and you ended up at Plum Village. I always wanted to go to Plum Village.
You should.
And I love Thich Nhat Hanh. For those that don't know, he's a well-known Zen master.
Zen Buddhist monk.
Yeah. And what was that like? What was Plum Village like? Tell me.
I was there 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And it felt like no time and no space.
Yeah.
I just, the journey there too, it just felt like I was going, the journey alone was like a different dimension in a way. Cause there was trains and there was so many different things I had to take, and I was all alone, and I just already was almost learning how to surrender fully. And that was foreign to me at the time, honestly. And arriving there was like arriving into a whole new world where we were on planet Earth, but it's this utopia.
Yeah.
And it's unbelievably beautiful, unbelievably simple, raw, and yet there's such a profoundness to it. And it was interesting because there was everything was a meditation, and that ultimately became my biggest takeaway.
Yes.
Still to this day was that there was a working meditation, there was an eating meditation, there was a walking meditation, there was a meditation, there was, honestly, a cleaning meditation, which kind of actually went into the working meditation. But I will never forget the one working meditation assignment me and a couple other women got, and we had to basically take down this, I'm bad with measurements, but it was this thorned bush that went along the entire entrance road. So it was no big, it was no small feat. And it was just 3 women with machetes, basically, and with this thorn bush. I remember, I'm an athlete. I was in the national team of Switzerland for rhythmic gymnastics. I used to be in track and field. I'm strong. To this day, I have never been so sore in my entire life. And it was also the most humbling experience because it was so painful, and we were getting so scratched up because it was this thorn bush that we were bleeding. We were extremely sore. We were extremely hot and tired. It was under the blazing sun. And you got to this threshold where you just couldn't do anything but laugh hysterically.
Right. Yeah.
And you completely surrendered from your ego into your heart.
Yeah.
And it was, I'll never forget that moment because, I was joking. I was like, if my parents knew that I was paying money to stay here, albeit a very small sum,
Yeah.
And doing this kind of laborer's work.
Yeah.
They would have me do so much more at home,
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was unbelievably peaceful and unbelievably chaotic because I was constantly learning how to still my mind and realizing how unbelievably loud it was.
And how was the adjustment with the silence? Because when you go to a monastery, silence becomes your best friend.
Yeah. I personally didn't have such a hard time adjusting to that aspect of it because I was born and raised in Switzerland despite my accent, and we lived right next to the forest. So I spent a lot of time. I spend a lot of time in silence, and I always have, just kind of in the forest, in nature by myself. So that wasn't a big adjustment. And I actually found myself leaving a lot of the seated meditations, like the group seated meditations, and just wanting to go out and meditate in nature by myself. almost needing like more silence, more energetic silence. I will say though, the journey, the really true Zen journey began after I left the monastery, because here I am, you know, basically thinking already again in my ego, I just spent this time at this Zen Buddhist monastery. I know how to meditate. I know what mindfulness is, in the I know of everything, right? And then I I took the train back and got back to Switzerland, and my mom actually picked me up from the airport. And within 5 minutes, anger came out of me.
Yes.
That I was like, what is this? I thought I was cured. I thought I was pure. I was, you know, I thought I was enlightened. And it was just like, boom.
Yes. Yes.
Humbling as nothing else I can tell you.
Oh,
And in that moment, I recognized, wow, okay, this is where the true monastery begins. This is where the true practice happens, you know?
The same thing happened to me.
Yeah.
I went to, and I've retreated to an ashram in 2012.
Wow.
And that's where I met my mentor, who was a mystic.
Mm-hmm.
And life has changed, right? The drive home is like floating in the clouds.
Yeah.
And within days, I'm yelling and I'm screaming and I'm like, what's happening?
I know. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. It's not something that can be quote unquote cured in a week or two.
Yeah. And it's not a curing either. What I found out, it's a learning. It's a constant learning, because even now, I mean, this was how long ago? I mean, a while ago, years ago. And still to this day, I'm learning how to just love my shadows and love the parts that I would, you know, so easily want to label as bad or wrong or whatever, you know, I would assume as negative. And just recognizing that that's part of the human journey is just learning how to love wholeheartedly, unconditionally, yourself first and foremost, which includes all of your parts, every single crazy nugget within you, every facet, every single dimensional aspect of yourself.
The crumbs in the bottom of the toaster.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I like that expression. Yeah.
Was Thich Nhat Hanh there when you were there?
He wasn't present though. He was in his he was really sick. We weren't sure if he was going to make it, and he thankfully did.
He did.
But he wasn't
still around.
Yeah, his spirit was present. You could feel, you know, his spirit in the air because he was staying at one of the homes nearby, but he wasn't present for it physically there.
Yeah, he's like 88 or 89 right now.
Mm-hmm. At least I think. Yeah.
And I think he just went back home to Vietnam.
Really? Oh, wow.
Yeah, to live out his last days.
Wow.
Yep.
Can you imagine going back to a country that kicked you out?
Yeah, they let him back.
Wow.
They let him back. So what made you go to Plum Village? Like, what was that moment like when because you have to go through an application process. I mean, you don't just show up and knock on the door.
Although I'm sure they would find room. But it's a journey to get there. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere. You know, like everything in life that's meant to be and that is meant to come into your path, there were a few seedlings, you know. It was just like it came into my field somehow, some way, by someone or something, and I can't remember what that initial source point was for that. And then suddenly I started hearing it, and then of course I knew about Thich Nhat Hanh, and I had some of his books, and suddenly something just said, "Go now." And I was newly living in New York. I think I had just moved to New York. I had left my first job in New York to start Standing Light, but there was this kind of integration period of, okay, now I started my company, but Standing Light never had a business plan. It was always a heart plan. So I first decided to come back home to Switzerland for a little bit because I moved out of the place that my apartment that I initially lived in New York. And I said, let me go home to Switzerland, spend some time there, recalibrate, figure out what's next while I set up and really just build Standing Light up. And it was in that time where I also planned on going to Plum Village because it was, I was in Switzerland and Plum Village is in France. So I took a flight and a train and a bus and another train and got there. But it was, it was pretty cold too. I think it was in October that I went, October and November.
You went from New York to France.
There were a few places in between, but yep, pretty much.
That's hardcore. That's like, because you could have went to a monastery, in the area.
Yeah, there's a sister monastery up north.
Blue Mountain, I think it's called.
Blue Cliffs, right?
Blue Cliffs, yes.
Blue Cliffs Monastery. It's in upstate New York, I think. Yeah, no, but I felt like I needed to go to the source, which is Plum Village, which is the original monastery he created. And I wanted it to be in Europe, to be honest. Like I felt like I wanted to also go back to my home, even though I sound American, Europe has always been more home to me.
Right.
So it was a homecoming in many ways.
What a journey. What a journey. So that's why I brought up, IIN where we met, because, we were on the same journey and didn't even really know it.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Because like I said, I was at an ashram.
Yes.
You end up at a Zen monastery.
Amazing.
But we're meeting over, kale and quinoa.
That could be the title of the podcast right there.
and you never know who's walking the quote unquote path, unless they're, cutting YouTube videos or making it known. You never really know. And it sounds like you waited for the right time to release this information to start helping people.
Yeah. It's interesting because, as I'm sure everything is energy. It's all vibration. And just like with a radio station, if you're tuned into one frequency, you're only going to get a certain amount of radio stations, right? And you're only going to be able to communicate on a walkie-talkie with one person, depending on which frequency you're tuning into. And over the years, I've launched quite a few things. I've I've partnered up with Mind Valley and done amazing events with big companies and organizations, and yet all throughout, I was still upgrading and expanding into higher and higher vibrations. And I think there's no surprise that now, at the vibration that I've arrived at, I feel like it's the most resonant to what Standing Light truly always was meant to be, and always was. It was just me actually growing into being my own Standing Light and really genuinely standing in my light and owning not just my light, but also my darkness, and just fully and wholeheartedly understanding what it means to be a standing light. And that in and of itself exudes a specific vibration where you're going to then attract and communicate with the people that understand that as well, and have been on their own standing light journey.
Yeah, it's amazing. And then there's so many synchronicities running into just things happening, and you're just like, oh, wow, that was,
right.
That connect like this and that connected like that.
Right.
And when you're aware of this,
yeah,
life, it's like watching a movie. It's like,
yes.
And all you can do is kind of giggle and laugh like, that's funny.
Because it's almost unbelievable to the mind. Yeah.
Have you had any experiences, light? Have you seen anything, felt anything, any satori's, anything like that?
Oh, I have activated the spaceship of my heart and traveled time and space and seen almost everything you can imagine.
I like how you call it a spaceship.
Yeah, it is. That's what I mean about its infinite powers. When you truly activate your heart, it's a multi-dimensional spacecraft, and it takes you places. And I did a lot of work with I don't know if you know um, Melchizedek or Daniel Maitel,
Mm.
and they talk all about, they go deep into the heart work, but also in the merkaba. And Daniel Maitel was actually at my place leading the first New York workshop ever. So I got, one-on-one time with him, and it was quite fascinating. And this was actually, quite a few years ago as well. But there's so many ways to approach it. And again, I'll keep saying this. It's always a unique journey,
Mm-hmm.
and it comes down to an intention. And when you feel the call of your heart, you can't deny it, and it will guide you, and you will show up in places that will take your breath away, because you just can't believe how naturally it showed up in your path. But that's what happens when you trust your heart, and when you let that magnetic force guide you towards the magnetic place you're supposed to be. That's why it magnetizes you towards it. And I truly believe that whether you do it through merkaba, or you just, because I really kind of let that whole thing go almost, and I just went deeper and deeper into my own heart's journey. And it really isn't, it's nothing fancy. It's very similar to arriving at the monastery and just doing the simple work. It's something that's so simple yet so profound. And you don't have to do all these exercises and merkaba activations and like breath work. And it's like, when you just use the power of intention, and you learn and know how to just move, even in the most basic manner, energy from your awareness, energy from your head into your heart, and you start to kind of learn how to move around in this space of the cave of the heart, I like to call it. And you start getting familiar with it, and you start really connecting with this force within yourself. It's nothing fancy. It's the most innate, pure way of being. It's just that we think it has to be so fancy and elaborate, So yeah, I mean, I journeyed far and wide. I've met star seed beings like that took my absolute, breath away. I've met also very dark beings. Yeah. Especially over the last 2-3 years, I went through what I called spiritual warfare. And I was even called to go certain places. And when I say called to go to certain places, I mean, a conference or a workshop or something would kind of come into my field. It would just pop up, and I just knew, like, it was almost like something higher than me was just urging me to go there and be there, even though I personally had no desire to go and be there, let alone spend money to be there, but it was this knowing, and fair enough. Like, at that point, I had already really done a lot of inner work and inner journeying, and activated my heart. But I think there's so many, it's the school of life, it's the school of like a light warrior, where when you heed the call, there's the first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, and you get to a certain point where you're like, oh my goodness, is this a freaking PhD class? Like, what on earth, and that's why most people don't do the inner work, because they don't want to journey down that path, because it's scary.
Yes. And I like how you call it spiritual warfare. I've equated it to detox, to somebody detoxing off of heroin or something like that.
Pretty much, yeah.
It's Jesus talked about it in the desert.
Yeah.
Buddha talked about it under the tree.
Yeah.
It's something that's been around for thousands and thousands of years. It's
right. Beyond. It's been around since the beginning of time. And you don't have to take anything outside of yourself. And I'm specifically talking about medicine, as you know, plant medicine, because so many people think that they need to face their demons, and the easiest way to do that is plant medicine. But you
like
can do
ayahuasca
that.
or something like that.
Yes, yeah.
Right.
And you know, I've personally never done ayahuasca. I have done other things, but I it's almost like I had to specifically not do that so that I could also talk and share about the fact that you can get to those places
That's right.
through the power of your heart.
That's right.
Because just the journey from your head into your heart alone, there's that beautiful expression that nobody really knows who said it, but it goes, the longest journey you will ever make is from your head to your heart. And it's true, because to get from your head into your heart truly and understand how to live from your heart, and it's a continuous daily practice, a moment to moment practice, especially in this world that we live in right now, in this three-dimensional reality of major ego and major polarization and duality. It's more natural to live from the head because it is a dualistic approach to life, you know. But
it's our computer.
It's our hard drive. And I say, what I say is, your heart is your core processor, your mind is your hard drive, the body is the motherboard, and the spirit is the power cord. But it's nothing without knowing. And the human, being human, is the most powerful
Creation.
ally, you know. But it's nothing without activating your inner intelligence and knowing how to use your different parts within you. And yeah, but really, going from the head into the heart in and of itself is the journey itself, really what that means. Because you're like, okay, well, what does that mean? What does going from your head to your heart mean? It means that even just starting to lean out of your head and trusting to surrender out of this controlling mechanism of the hard drive, which operates off of memory, means that you're starting to let go of the known. And most of us don't like to do that because we want to stay in the known, because that's what's comfortable and that's what we know. And nobody likes to be uncomfortable. So that's the first step of learning to actually let go of the known and get mildly comfortable with the unknown. That's the first step.
It's well said.
Once you start getting comfortable with this weird thing called the unknown, then comes the ego work. And that's a really painful journey, because it is a shedding of who you thought you were and what you thought you wanted and what you thought you needed. And truly, truly, it's the art of letting go. And Thich Nhat Hanh, I think I learned a lot about the art of letting go at Plum Village, but it didn't start until afterwards.
Becoming nobody, but yet still living in the material world.
Exactly.
That's the hard part. Is, I mean, I know on my journey, when I started becoming nobody, I didn't want to do anything. I just wanted to sit in my chair. I have a chair in my bedroom. I just wanted to sit in my chair all day and maybe at the most read. That's all I wanted to do. Didn't want to go into the office, didn't want to go to the computer, didn't want to do social media, didn't want to do any of that. And so one of my mentors, Prem Vishrant, who's on episode 42 on this podcast for anyone listening, I had a talk with him, and he said, you know, you got to get out of that because you still have to operate in the material world. He said, just think of it as a sandcastle. You're building a sandcastle. Eventually, the water is going to come and ruin it anyway. So you might as well just go out there and, you know, give it your best shot, but just don't take it all so serious. And just, there's a balance between knowing that you're not your mind, you're not your body, you're nobody, you're just this light, this beautiful light, and then having to go out there and make money, and having to go out there and be in a relationship, or dealing with mom and dad, or, you know, just getting in a traffic jam.
The day-to-day in spaceship Earth. Yeah, I think it's a matter of, I think we we s- we all want to find this illusionary state of called balance, but really what it is harmony. Because there's in nature is our number one teacher. And we've lost touch with our own human nature, and that's why we are out of balance with nature, our inner nature and our outer nature, because we are obsessed with finding, quote unquote, this illusionary state of balance, rather than understanding that it's actually harmony. Because in nature, there will be tornadoes, there will be tsunamis, there will be fires, chaos. All of that is chaos, right? But then what happens? It all has a purpose, it all has a natural function to restore the harmony. So there's going to be chaos in order to arrive at order. And so it it's so vital to understand that it's not about finding this perfect balance, because that doesn't exist. There is no such thing as perfect balance. There's such a thing as resonant harmony. And when you come into harmony, you understand that there's going to be days and moments and times and experiences and conversations and whatever it may be, parts of yourself that are going to show up as chaotic. And the harmonization of it is to understand that just because something's chaotic or out of tune doesn't mean the whole song has to be thrown out, right? It's just a matter of, it's the string that's just trying to reattune itself to come into resonance again. And making one thing better or worse, and I say this all the time, it's so easy to glorify light and demonize darkness. We've been programmed to actually do that by the church.
Mm-hmm.
And so we think that light is good and dark is bad. And that has been so deeply programmed into our beingness for years upon years upon years. And so we therefore also internalize that, and we believe that if we're out of balance, or if we have darkness or anger, we immediately believe it's bad. We label it, and then we shove it away, and we don't want to deal with it because we think it's bad. And we're supposed to be in the light, and we're supposed to be good, and we're supposed to be perfect so that we can go to heaven, or whatever it may be that, your nirvana is. And it's that in and of itself is living in illusion, because you're living from a polarized state of being, which is black and white, wrong and right, bad and good.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no such thing. And within that cycle, we're never going to be able to actually heal, because the moment we make something wrong or bad, we're not giving it enough love and light to actually show its true self.
Well said. You seem like a very entrepreneurial person from the beginning, before even all this. When you went through your journey and you had all your spiritual warfare, first of all, how long did the spiritual warfare last? And how did you get back to working and creating a business?
It was never separate. I would say the more I learned how to stand in my light, the more darkness came my way. And it was my teacher. It was my greatest teacher, because it helped me understand that the deeper and the higher I go, the more I'm going to be given. And it's not a matter of shutting off and running away and thinking that that's a bad thing. It's a matter of even more owning your light and the darkness and not making it wrong. It was interwoven. It wasn't a matter of, there were moments for sure where I had to take a break and I had to stop, because and that was actually just quite recently. It was beginning of 2019, where I went through what I would call the first spiritual warfare. And I think my soul had gotten to a certain place where I could no longer deny my power, but I was actually dimming my light because I was scared of my power and I was scared of my light. And there's that famous quote by Marianne Williamson that goes, "We're most afraid of our own light, not our darkness." And it is one of the most profound quotes I've ever read, because it's a lengthy quote. It's about a paragraph, and it holds so much wisdom, because the moment that initial experience happened, and I had a few prior to that, it was almost like gearing me up, but they were few and far between and really kind of just like short instances. And they were short enough and quick enough where I was almost able to just ignore them. But then I came into a full-blown spiritual warfare that lasted over like a week. And I was getting basically woke. I don't want to say attacked. It felt that way. It felt like I was being attacked, but I was really just being woken up even deeper. And it was so easy to be scared, and it was so easy to just crumble and like hide under my sheets. But I knew that that's not why it was happening for me. So I decided to actually do what one of my mentors then told me was, a 3-day version of sitting like Buddha, sitting under the Bodhi tree, because I decided to fully face all of me. And so I decided to just sit, and I practically didn't eat, move, sleep, or do anything for 3 days and 3 nights. And I didn't even know, what Buddha did under the tree. It was just a knowing that I had to do this. And it was a matter of almost survival for my own soul expansion. And that's what I've always been after. It's just this knowing that I'm meant to expand, continuously expand.
So you basically took 3 days off from life and discovered life.
Yeah, I guess that's a good way of putting it.
And
yeah.
what happened at the end of the 3 days?
It was similar to what happened once I left the monastery. That's when the journey really just began again. So it was a full life restart in every way. And a few months later, I moved out of New York and moved back to Switzerland. But for a good 3 months, intensely 3 months. And then, it continued a little bit, and it continues always, but for really some intense 3 months, I went through the biggest ego crash of my entire life. And I learned to not make any kind of other being or entity, whether it's benevolent or maleficent or dark or light, because I bore witness to all of them. And the only way I was ever able to truly find peace within me, within that experience, which was then the moment that I was able to guide them back into the light, in a sense, because that's also why they were coming to me. It was only when I let go of my fear of them, which is also part of who I am, right? That this almost like, light doorway portal opened up and they were able to go through it. But I then also had to, and for people that are listening, maybe have no idea what I'm talking about with spiritual warfare. I mean, there was a week where I was hearing, feeling, seeing, experiencing entities come into my immediate field. And there was the most powerful experience and absolutely terrifying experience was an astral experience that I had, where I was sleeping. It was in the middle of the night, but I knew the quote unquote dream that I was having was not a dream. It was it was an energetic experience that I was just trying to navigate through while I just so happened to be, my body happened to be asleep, but I was awake.
Sure.
And I didn't go to sleep astral traveling or anything like that. It happened. And in this astral experience, there was an entity that was attacking me, and I was fighting back with grace. And literally that kept being the word that kept coming to me. Say grace, say grace, say grace. That's what I kept feeling and hearing that I had to do and say. And it was very random. And the third time I said it, I started waking up by a sound that was actually happening in the 3D. And I didn't know what it was. So I started and it was 4 a.m. And I, that like weird state where you're like half awake and half asleep and you are so disoriented and you're also completely freaked out. And I basically had guided that entity into the light. But basically the way the curse, quote unquote curse, was broken was that weird sound I was woken up by got louder and louder and louder, and suddenly full-blown explosion of my mirror. At 4 a.m., my mirror started cracking, and the crack of my mirror was what woke me up. And at, I think, like 4 a.m. on the dot, leaning on my wall, exploded into smithereens.
Your mirror literally shattered in the material world.
Yep.
So you woke up with some evidence.
I woke up with a few shards of evidence. Yep. It was in that moment where I had to take notice of my power. I could no longer deny it.
Right. And
once I did that, for a good year, I went through experiences that literally are barely even expressed in action movies, or like, I mean, it was one absolutely unbelievable experience after another. And
now, did they happen? Did they happen during meditation, during sleep, or just while you're getting gas at a gas station?
In every way, shape, and form and experience. I mean, one was at a conference, at a quote unquote like energy spiritual conference. Another one was with a person that was reading my palm, actually. So he witnessed all of it. He had never experienced anything like he to this day, he must be absolutely he must wonder what kind of a creature I am, because I mean, temperature in the room was changing, not for me, but for him. It was, when you really, really, take that journey from your head into your heart, and you start to bear witness to the infinite potential of human beings, you realize that everything they show in movies is real and more. It's just that our minds are too scared to actually comprehend it and take notice of it because it's too complicated.
Right. People usually only understand what they can see and hear, what their five senses can digest. So here you are, you have your lifestyle membership program, you have this operation where you're going to help people. Do you come out and tell people this stuff, or do you keep it simple in the beginning? Because look, I mean, I get it too. Like, I had somebody say they can't listen to this podcast because it's too esoteric for them.
Totally.
And so we know that specifically Europe and Americas are very Christian. That they're not down for the spiritual warfare, Leyla.
Oh, I know. I wasn't either. Most of us aren't.
So how can you help people? You use the word heart a lot. You're using language and methods to make people understand something that's very hard to understand, because there's so much to unlearn for the average person.
Exactly. Yeah. To answer your immediate question, no, I don't just come out and say this. This is definitely the first more public, but you're asking and I'm going to give it to you.
Inner peace exclusive.
I'm an open book, and if anyone knows me, they know that about me. I have nothing to hide. I hid most of my life, and that's not my purpose. And so, if people have curiosity and they have questions, I will answer them truthfully from my heart. And I know that judgments will come because it has nothing to do with me. It's just, I mean, if I was listening to myself 5 years ago, I would have judgments on myself as well. I still have judgments on myself. I mean, that's just part of the human journey. So, to anyone that is listening and finds themselves in judgment, I already forgive. I already love you. And it's just who we are. It's how we've been trained to operate, and it's not wrong. It's just a matter of unlearning how to, it's a matter of unlearning and just dropping into the heart to understand that there's no right or wrong. It just is. And it's an enlightened way of life. And I'm guiding people through the journey at any different stage. The material, the courses, the programs, the offerings, the meditations that are already in there, they're actually older material. So if they're in there now and starting, it's definitely not at this level. But as I start sharing more in there, there's videos coming. I have an incredible 3-part episode series with one of the co-creators of Heart Math. And he breaks it down in a very heart math, very physical, masculine way that is very easy to understand. And then, as I grow and dare and choose to share my journey for the people like you that exist in this world as well, which it's not just you and I, there's so many. And I know that I'm sure most of your listeners, if they're listening, then they already understand a lot of this stuff and also understand that they don't know anything at the same time as well. I hope that at whatever level anyone is at, including myself, that we can listen with an open heart and an open mind. And when and if something doesn't resonate in that moment in time, not to make ourselves wrong and to just kind of keep it in the distant, and eventually maybe not. But at some point in time, if it's meant to come back and resonate more in the vibration that person is at that moment in time, it will. And I trust that.
So if somebody is doing your program in your membership and they end up in a spiritual warfare type of situation, you can help them.
Absolutely.
You're a guru.
No, I'm not. Absolutely not.
That's what gurus do. That's the beauty of it. Health coach. That's what a health coach does. Is what
I believe we're all. I honestly, I want to stream away from the labels, because it creates a hierarchy.
Well, I think, something that comes up on this podcast very often, something I talk about a lot. In fact, I'll probably do a whole episode dedicated to it, is East versus West. And the differences are unbelievable. Here in the West, we idolize celebrities.
Oh, yeah.
And in the East, they idolize gurus. So it's different. Somebody, if Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson walks in the room, somebody's going to faint. Oh my God, they're going to faint, right?
Yeah.
If an Indian guru walks in the room in the East, they get down, they touch the feet. If somebody runs into Thich Nhat Hanh, it's a big ordeal. The West is just not used to the East, that they're just not used to that guru mentality. The stuff that you're saying is, it's your experience, but it's happened to millions of people before.
Absolutely.
It's a shared experience. Right. It might be slightly different, but it's a shared experience. And typically it's happened in India and China and Japan and Tibet. not something that happens in New York and Los Angeles. Because, you know, the West is stuck in the church and the synagogue. We're stuck in that a different hierarchy. So that's what I meant by guru, is that, you know, the culture has been always, there's an Indian or Chinese guru of some sort, and they help the students through those situations. So
let's go with guide. Let's go with
sure.
Heart guide.
Sure.
I'll be their heart guide.
Our coach.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're just playing with language anyway, right?
I know. It's all just, we can make up any word. I know.
What's fascinating to me is when you find someone who is taking these truths and is packaging them up in a way that's going to help Westerners. Eckhart Tolle is a good example. You know, Eckhart Tolle, he's not going as deep as, you know, Ramana Maharshi or Osho. You know, he's not. He's keeping it very Western.
Baseline.
Yeah. So, you know, I like that. We need more Westerners who have these experiences to teach Westerners these experiences. So I like what you're doing. I like how you're packaging it up.
Thank you.
You know, I call my stuff inner peace. I'm not calling it enlightenment. I'm not calling it self-realization. I'm not calling it astral travel. I'm calling it inner peace.
And you might do all of those things to get inner peace, but
right. Although I was driven to use it because it rhymed with my last name, but
I love it. Yeah, that's genius. Inner peace with Ken and Reese.
Now, how are you going to find something that rhymes with your last name?
Oh, goodness. Do you want to say it?
Salvade.
Good job.
I did it? Italian?
Yeah, you
Salvade.
did. See, the hand helps.
Yeah. Tomato, Salvade.
Exactly.
What does mom and dad think about what you're doing?
Well, my mom was really my catalyst. She taught us, you know, I come from an extremely multicultural family. My mom was born in Egypt. She grew up in Lebanon, but she's half American. My father's Swiss, but he grew up between Colombia and Venezuela. So growing up in this small town in Switzerland, I heard 6 languages at the same time on any given day. And I had one grandfather that was praying towards the sun with his Islamic beads. And I had my other grandfather who took us to Catholic church. So I grew up, hearing everything from Swiss German to Arabic and really understanding the world in a very
dynamic,
good word. Yeah. Dynamic manner. And so my mom, you know, growing up during the Civil War in Lebanon, seeing literally with her own 2 eyes, people being burnt on crosses in the name of religion, quote unquote. From an early age, she taught us that we can choose whatever religion and faith and practice we want to do. Like, it doesn't matter. There's not one specific one we're going to practice at home, because ultimately the only true religion is love. My mom gets it. However, she so gracefully said, you only hope that your children outgrow you. And so sometimes I don't think she quite understands anymore what I'm talking about or what I'm doing, because it's like we're born with new DNA as well, you know, and whatever wave we are, you know, whatever. I think was it Dolores Cannon that talks about the different waves of children that are born. I think it's her, but we're coming in with different DNA, with higher attunements to different awarenesses. So, yeah, my mom taught me everything I know, and then I took it to the next level. And my father was always this very peaceful, still is, um, but a little bit removed, masculine that just kind of lets us be. He was the one man in the household of three women. So he just kind of peacefully stood to the side and let us do our thing.
Very cool. Leyla, I just want to sing your name. Leyla, you got me. How many people do that to you? And it's a famous song.
Yeah, less and less, because it's, a lot of people nowadays don't even know the song, actually.
This has been a great conversation. I can't wait to edit it, because one of the joys of editing for me is I get to re-listen to it. And I think there's some big gems in here for the listeners. Where can people come say hello to you on social media?
At Standing Light. So everything's Standing Light, standinglight.com, where they can get access to the lifestyle membership as well. Standing Light on Instagram. Instagram is definitely the easiest way to connect with me.
All right. Well, it's been a pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Kevin. I really appreciate it.
What a conversation, huh? Leyla is a shining example of what is possible. Been talking about it for weeks and weeks and weeks with you, that we have an inner potential. You just have to have some discipline and tap into it. Religion will only take you so far. Praying will only take you so far. At some point, if you want to elevate, if you want to thrive as a human being, you got to sit down with discipline and make it happen. Listening to this podcast is a great way to stay motivated and stay relaxed and keep gaining an understanding of what is possible. Same with the meditation album, which, again, I recommend you use. I made it for you. I'm really looking forward to the next episode. I am going to be having a conversation with a Zen master. I've been waiting for this for a long time. So be sure to follow my work on drreese.com. That's doctor spelled out. And I'll talk to you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening to Inner Peace with Dr. Reese. If this episode opened your heart, feel free to share on social media and tell your loved ones. Also, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next time, may peace be with you.